I'd like to remind you that these stars are not necessarily what's going to be on the exam. There will be stuff on the test tomorrow that didn't receive stars today. That always happens. And some of the things that I give stars to, I know won't be on the test tomorrow. It's just I need you to study them with a little extra attention because they will accumulate later on for the units, or they'll come up on the AP test in May, or whatever. As we go through, I will also make a few notes about things you might want to consider. Since we did not go over the reading packet in movies, I might make a few comments about some of those issues as we go through in order. I know, but I thought we discussed this already. Did we? Did I misunderstand our conversation?
No, certainly did not.
Maybe you did. Now you understand our conversation? I can fix that noise, I promise. All right. In 6.1, stars on the limiting factors. Also, a youth bulge is AKA a baby boom.
So why do they fluctuate in food?
We may talk about that later. It was one of your study goals. In assignment 6.2, there were a bunch of terms about disease that I'm not sure your period heard. I threw them out in some periods, but not others. So did I mention zoogenic disease in this period?
Yeah.
That gets a star. Did I mention pandemic disease? An epidemic that spreads across large areas of land. So it's an epidemic that goes from Europe to Asia, for example. That's called pandemic. It's like a long-distance epidemic. Pandemic. And did I mention emergent diseases in this class? Emergent is, an emerging disease, a new disease. Like SARS. No, sorry, that's a bad example. Like MRSA, the resistant staphylococcus infections. That is an emergent disease. It's becoming more and more common. It's like it's coming up. So they were pandemic, zoogenic, and emergent. 1 star each. Yes?
Do you mind defining zoogenic again?
Zoogenic is born in animals, coming from animals. Carcinogen, mutagen, teratogen, and allergen, that little cluster of words, that gets 4. Synergism has come up before, and I gave it stars before. So I guess now that it's come up again, remember it's an important concept, synergy, when the combined effects are worse than you would expect just from the individual ingredients. Point source, non-point source, area source, and mobile source get 1 star. Yes?
What an example of a synergistic, compound, I guess, would be like sulfur dioxide. It's like carbon dioxide and sulfur are both kind of bad when they combine to make acid.
I think a better example might be Drano and bleach going down the drain. Drano's okay to go down the drain. Bleach is okay to go down the drain. But when you mix those, it makes a toxic gas that's deadly.
Okay.
It's an unexpected outcome from the combination.
Right.
And usually we refer to these things as happening inside of your body. So cigarette smoke is bad for you, and asbestos exposure is bad for you. But when you're exposed to both of those things, the outcome is extremely, way worse than just, the odds of one plus the odds of the other for hurting. Methylation gets 2 stars. Key concept, don't forget methylation. Grasshopper effect gets 1 star. LD50 gets 1 star. And everything downhill from detox gets 1. So detox, bioremediation, phytoremediation. I added in class mycoremediation. Acute and chronic effects of disease. In the chapter 16 vocab, subsidence, direct effect, and indirect effect. In the questions 1 through 25, the movie questions, I'd like you to please notice a couple of trends. Any questions about economic consequences of demographics? So how demographics affects your economy? Also, any age structures that you drew. Because the countries that you saw in that movie are all very famous. Number 1 gets a star. Number 3 gets a star. Number 6 gets a star. Number 8 and 9. $11 gets a star. 17 and 18 get a star. Number 26 gets 2 stars, and I'd like to add a couple of comments really quickly. In number 26, you should know that R selection and K selection are often discussed as R strategy or K strategy, because these are terms that describe reproductive strategies. Also, you should know that R selection is for generalists, K selection is for specialists. If you understand generalist and specialist, R strategy and K strategy makes sense. So you have a dynamic, changing environment where conditions might be good or they might be bad. A generalist does better. That's why they have like a zillion babies. Because they know most of them aren't going to make it, but every now and then a whole bunch could help a lot, could help that population a lot. It's like a boom or bust strategy to make 1 trillion babies that don't have big chances of survival. On the other hand, if you know that specialists do better in a stable environment, you can imagine why they use a slow and steady reproductive strategy. They make a single offspring. They put a lot of investment into that offspring because in a very stable environment where a specialist does better, you want to focus on really nurturing that one baby and then you let them go. So remember, boom and bust cycles, generalist, make a trillion babies, slow and steady, stable environment, make one baby, put all your energy into that one. You're not playing the odds. You're guaranteeing that your one offspring will survive.
Which one of those is R and which one is K?
R is the first, boom and bust, for generalist. K is the latter, slow and steady for specialists. Anybody want to ask me something about this? It's a 2-star issue, and we're just now finishing up that conversation about generalist, specialist, slow and steady. All right.
Wait, could
Wait.
that apply, the reproductive strategies applies to all of the things, not just humans, right?
Not what?
Not just humans, it applies to...
Oh, absolutely. Humans, by the way, we already know what our reproductive strategy is. It's only K.
Could it also apply to,
Plants and,
no, yes.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'm saying, the differences in reproductive strategies here in India, where they have more kids.
Oh.
Insurance children.
I would not apply this to different human populations. Although, surprisingly, that does work metaphorically. Because we're all one species, I like to think of us as all one species and not.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're kind of interesting that might sort of apply also to populations. I just want to remind you that our reproductive habits are very circumstantial, but genetically we're designed to be case selection. Like we are an example as a species, organismally, genetically speaking, just one of these. Behaviorally, you may notice a correlation, and that's an interesting extension, but I wouldn't go too far with that. Number 27 was today's warm-up and gets 1 star. Does anybody know which was the most politically active period in the last 100 years of American history? If you think about it, the early 1970s, how old were the baby boomers from 1969 until 1975? Yeah, early to mid-20s, right? In the United States, it's a perfect example. Anybody know the age of your average Al-Qaeda operative globally?
20 or 30.
Yeah, early 20s. Thank you, that was funny. We laughed at that, right? It's the same reason. Political demonstrators in the early 1970s had a lot to complain about in their societies, just like every other age group. But unlike every other age group, when you get out of high school or when you get out of college, you're not really tied down by social obligations. You don't have a mortgage. You don't have mouths to feed. You've been kicked out of the house, but it's hard to get a job, and it's hard to get your foot into the economy. And so the most politically active groups, whether we're talking about Afghanistan, or whether we're talking about Indonesia, or whether we're talking about the Sudan, or we're talking about the United States, the most politically and socially active, like bubbling cauldron of political revolt, usually late teens, early 20s. People who don't have a lot to lose, have a lot to complain about, not much to hold them back. You know, if your average college kid has something to complain about, they go to a political demonstration, they throw Molotov cocktails at the Pope, they picket at their favorite business, they boycott, they donate to political groups. If Jose Caballero has something to complain about, sorry, I'm busy. Like, at my age, like, sorry, I got a mortgage. I can't ditch work to go to the political demonstration. I got to babysit. I can't afford to boycott because I'm on a budget. The most politically active age group is always that transition from young adulthood to adulthood. So when your youth bulge hits the late teens, early 20s, whatever country you're in, that's a politically sensitive time. When the American baby boom reached that age, late 1960s, early 1970s, you might remember political demonstrations, anti-war demonstrations, civil rights era, all that stuff. In other countries, if they don't have options, this would be the so-called the terrorist masses or the Civil War masses. Yeah.
The youth goals also a threat to jobs, seeing how there's so many people going into working there at the same time, and there's only really jobs, so there's a job competition.
Well,
There's a lot of poverty.
yeah, well, interesting thing is usually a lot of job competition means you have higher employment rates. But if you have too many people for the number of jobs, then that's another reason why they're pissed and why they're going to be politically active. It's not that big populations threaten employment. Big populations usually fill all jobs, but then there's people left over because they are the historically biggest group. So out of 100 jobs, we have 110 people. We're going to fill every one of those 100 jobs, but we got 10 angry people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Number 28 gets 1 star, but there was a typo. Might be. Where it says lower population growth, it should have said lower climate change. And there was a really famous study that found that the single cheapest way to lower climate change is through birth control. By letting people control population size, you get the least investment of dollars to lower carbon in the future. It is the single cheapest way to prevent climate change, is to help people avoid unwanted pregnancies. Since every person has a share of the carbon economy, less people means less carbon. All right. 30 gets a star. 31 gets 2 stars, and warning about 31. I got to warn you, first of all, I know it's hard to keep track of all those chemical names, but this is really necessary trivia. The College Board often asks about these. I'll finish the stars in under 1 minute. I'm sorry to waste your time. 32 gets 1. 33 gets 3 stars. Critical. 36 gets 2 stars. Light pollution is important in number 56. 40 gets a star. 41 gets 3, but you already know it. 42 gets 1 star. 43 gets 2 stars, especially for why poverty leads to population growth. 45 gets 3 stars. In number 47, Thomas Malthus gets 2 stars. 48 gets 2 stars for the way it organizes so much content in this unit. 50 gets 1. 51 gets 2 stars. 54 gets a star. 55 had those 3 important examples I told you about in earlier lectures: smelting, dioxin, and Minamata Bay in Japan. 56 gets 2 stars, 57 gets 3, 60 gets 2 stars, and 61 and 62 each get 1 star. Sorry to keep you, that was my mistake. I lost track of time. Bye, students.